Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. So the Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has had a video call with officials from the International Olympic Committee. The IOC said she had assured them she was safe and well, but wanted people to respect her privacy. She disappeared from the public eye for almost 3 weeks after she made sexual assault allegations against a former Chinese vice premier. The IOC president, Thomas Bach, said he'd spoken to her for around 30 minutes and that she was doing just fine. So why do doubts persist about whether she can speak freely? Well, for more on this story, I'm joined now from London by Arise correspondent Judita Dasilva. Great to see you, Judita. What more do we know about this call, which I understand lasted less than 30 minutes, although some reports say 15 minutes?
Yeah, well, it's first images that you've shown of the IOC president, Thomas Bach, speaking to Peng Shuai on this video call were posted to the IOC's social media page. And according to Thomas Bach, it was 30 minutes. She said she was in good spirits and she was all was safe and well, and she was at her home in Beijing, and she wanted her privacy to be respected at this time, and she just wanted to spend time with friends and family, but she would still be engaged in activities to do with tennis. So it all seems like very kosher and above board, but the issue is just the execution of it just seems very soulless and very muted, which is what hasn't done much to allay the fears of people like the Women's Tennis Association, who said that she doesn't seem to have the ability to speak freely without coercion or direction, because that's what would really prove to them that she's okay. But as far as meeting the burden of proof of life, this has done so on China's part.
So just to be clear, I guess the underlying message here is that Peng Shuai asked for privacy, according to Thomas Bach. So does this conversation end concerns about her? Obviously, it ends concerns about her immediate safety, doesn't it?
It does. The concern that it does end is that people were worried that she was physically harmed. Now they know she's physically unharmed. But this came after a lot of pressure from the United Nations, humanitarian organizations, the American government, lots of tennis stars, and there was even a protest staged in New York by Chinese feminists. And with that level, because the unique thing about Peng Shuai is that she's one of the only high-profile Chinese sports stars that they have, tennis stars. And she was former ranked doubles #1. She's won 2 Grand Slams, one of which was Wimbledon. So she was like a jewel in the crown when it comes for international PR for China. But now this has backfired, because since she made that allegation on the social media, China's social media Weibo, when she accused the vice premier Zhang Gaoli of sexual assault, she's gone off radar. And the shock of having someone that high profile just disappear without explanation has exposed the issues that many have talked about the way the Chinese government operates. So that's why the conversation hasn't ended, concerns haven't ended, because what happened to her was inexplicable in a country that purports to give its people freedoms to function as Chinese citizens.
Right, well, let's take up that the issue of the allegations, because, as you said, the UN, the Tennis Association, etc., they've all been clear that they want the allegations she made of being forced into sex with the Chinese former vice premier to be thoroughly investigated. Do we know if those allegations have been followed up on?
There has been no even reference to it. There was a press conference with the foreign minister in China, and his response was he was not aware of this situation and it is not a foreign affairs issue, and he completely dismissed it, which is indicative of the attitude China has. They focused more on the fact she was missing, this is her, she's fine. No one is addressing this allegation, which is why the WTA has even threatened to pull all the events they're doing in China. And then there've even been threats that now we're thinking that athletes themselves, because we know China is due to host the Winter Olympics in a couple of months, athletes feel unsafe going there, because if you're going to a country where you can't speak freely, and I referenced the moment when an NBA star, one of the biggest NBA stars in the world, made a comment about China, and the backlash was so quick, he was forced to walk his statements back. That's the level of power China has. So what they're looking at now is that if people of this stature and this fame don't have the freedom to speak, because even the way they released images of her, it was not on her social media feed, which has been down since November 3rd when they pulled her allegation. It's been on the Global Times, which is the state-controlled media channel. And it's just these clips where you see in the video her and her coach constantly saying the date over and over again to kind of drum home the fact that this happened last night. But she doesn't speak, she doesn't eat, she doesn't engage, she's just present. That's why people are concerned that she isn't free to actually communicate. And that's why they're worried that should she communicate, she will then re-bring up the allegations that she made, and that would reinforce the need for the investigation.
So basically, Judita, something of a half answer here, isn't it? I mean, we know she's safe, but we really don't know much else.
Absolutely not. And that's why everyone's very frustrated. But then what this shows, what the bigger conversation is the power of the way the Chinese government runs. And they're showing that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what success you have. It doesn't matter what power you think you have. You fall in line with what we say, or you do not function at all. It happened with huge film stars like Fan Bingbing. It happened with its fintech giant Jack Ma, who was one of the lead founders of Alibaba, who, after he criticized state regulators, he went missing for a while, and then re-emerged months later under a very subdued tone, where you know that he'd been put in check. What China is saying is that whatever the rules may be in the West, in our country, you fall under the rule of law that we dictate. Otherwise, we can pull a massive tennis star or a massive fintech giant or a movie star until they fall in line.
Yes, that's a good analysis. But I mean, in this particular circumstance, I mean, looking, for instance, at those Chinese state media releases in the last few days, and all the stuff going on with this, I mean, what do they tell us? Because, I mean, it rather suggests, doesn't it, that this whole case has been handled in a very clumsy way by China, and it suggests that for all the power the country has, I mean, they don't appear to know how to handle things that come out of the blue.
Absolutely, because one thing you can say about China is that for all its might, it doesn't have much bedside manner. And the ham-fisted way they've gone about the world reacting, because they were put under a lot of pressure they weren't expecting very quickly. When you look at the caliber of tennis stars that rallied behind Peng Shuai, you're thinking about Serena Williams, Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Naomi Osaka, all publicly rallying people behind them to say, where is she? They were in a situation where the world was dictating that you needed proof of life. So the way they've done it is kind of like, oh, you want to know she's alive? Here's a picture. But we won't let her show you a picture of herself. We won't let her speak for herself. We'll show you the picture and take it at that. That is not the way to conduct themselves. But then you look at the Chinese Republic. They are a country that operates by their own rules. When they're put in a situation where they have to function by the rules of the West, they have issues because they're not used to listening to anyone. They're used to the world operating on their demands. Even look at COVID. They refuse to yield to anybody's regulation. But in the case of the violations of human rights, even look at what they're doing with the Uyghurs. The rest of the world is saying that this is unacceptable. But again, they're treading lightly because such is the power and influence of China. Having that level of enemy is not something any country wants. So they have to navigate doing right by the people, but doing right by the functionality of economies that depend on China.
So we've got less than a minute. I mean, would it be right then to assume that for the Chinese authorities, those right at the top are seriously troubled by this international reaction to all of this? I mean, because of course the censorship machine in China has been in overdrive over this, and that in itself speaks to the deep sensitivity of the allegations. Briefly.
Yes, and because the key point about what Peng Shuai said, this is the most high-profile accusation in China's Me Too movement, which has been way behind everyone else. So the pressure is from the entire global female community, the sporting community, and also governments. So China is now under pressure like it's never had before, because they've now tapped into a revolution that's miles ahead in other countries. And this might be the catalyst that forces them to pick up and move in that direction.
Judita, as always, thank you very much indeed. Judita Dasilva, Arise correspondent, talking to me there from London. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world, bye-bye and thank you for watching.